The voice of sharing, 突然的想。
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
Hi, this is Fadzli.
Together with us is a guest that is
Who's a basketball player?
Yeah, maybe a professional one.
No, I'm not actually.
Well, his name is Mislan, and he is the chief editor at Pemainbolakeranjang.com. So that is your blog, right? A blog that
Yeah,
you started.
I started as a blog spot and then I converted to a .com domain.
Mm-hmm. And today we are going to talk about Malaysia's basketball development race. And it's interesting because when we talk about basketball, we don't really see it as a national sports. We see it as a sport that is being played by probably in those in high school, or just something that you would see probably in the NBAs and all that, but you won't necessarily click it into our national psyche. But why you dwell into basketball in the beginning? Like, what get you into like the mood of basketball?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I started to become interested with basketball when I read the manga Slam Dunk. Have you ever heard of it? That's the Sakuragi Hanamichi, Rokawa Kaide. Those are the part that get me interested with basketball actually.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And we have our intern here, Fadzli, also is a basketball buff. And for you personally, being playing this since high school, I would suggest?
Since I was 14 actually.
Oh, wow. So also, why like young Malaysian gain interest in the sport of basketball? Is it because of it is part of the school curriculum or core curriculum, or is it part of the class jasmani during those hours, or is it more than that?
I think it's like Mislan said, probably just about every kid who grew up in Malaysia or in Asia in general would have grown up at some point or other read Slam Dunk, and probably that's what would encourage us to take up the sport in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And of course now with satellite TV, we get the NBA and other basketball leagues throughout the world, and it sort of draws more interest into the sport. So yeah, basketball is a sport that's growing in its popularity.
But would you say that it's a lot more rife in Chinese schools compared to other schools in Malaysia?
I think it's more popular in the primary school, in the Chinese school, because I think when we take a look at the primary schools, especially in the Chinese school, they don't have much of a big field. They usually have like one basketball court or maybe two. Compared with the primary school as in the Sekolah Kebangsaan, a lot of football field. So I think the interest there is actually is like a norm that the kids we go play in the Sekolah Kebangsaan, we go play football, whereas the kids in the Chinese school we go play basketball. However, though, I would say that in some schools, such as I would say that schools in Subang Jaya, actually those areas, I think the kids there would probably take basketball as their first sports instead of football. I think because the environment, the lifestyle over there, they think that basketball is much more cooler sports than football, from my opinion, though.
And how has Malaysia been doing in an international arena, maybe?
Have you been better than anyone else in Southeast Asia?
Malaysia, in terms of Southeast Asia, actually we were good. We were second best team next to the Philippines. I think if you take a look at the SEA Games, for the men category, for the past SEA Games, Malaysia only won one, while the rest of it won by the Philippines. If you take a look in the women category, though, it's kind of different. The women team, they dominated the basketball category. We won about like 12 goals in the SEA Game. However, for the past few years, I think from 2013 and 2011, actually, the Thai women team actually has won the gold medal for the SEA Games in the women category.
Interesting. So how did you started your blog? Like, what sparked you into the interest of sharing your views on basketball?
Well, I was studying in the United States for 2.5 years. At the time, we have this sort of, do you know Circus 99? So we have before Facebook they were Friendsters, and before Friendsters they were Circus 99. So we have like this sort of community, a non-Chinese basketball community, cater for the non-Chinese basketball market. But then at the time I couldn't find any other information about basketball, especially in English or Malay. So when I come back here to Malaysia, I started to, because blogspot was the in thing, so I started to get all this information from the Circus 99 to the blogspot to share the information with all the other members who were not in the Circus 99 group.
Mm-hmm. And I think this question has been raised many times. Why the sport of basketball is being dominated by Chinese and not other races? What is the reason behind this?
It's only in Malaysia that actually the sports of basketball is being dominated by the Chinese. I think you have to take a look in terms of few contexts, which is first you have to take a look from the historical point of view, which is actually the Chinese school teacher that brought the game from the China to Malaysia during the 1930s. So they grow sports there. They make the sports popular in the Chinese school, in the primary schools and all. And also the sports become more popular in the community. They're also the one who develop all the interstate tournaments and whatnot. And if you take a look nowadays environment, I think, like I said previously, there are more football fields in the sekolah kebangsaan compared to the Chinese school. In most of Chinese school, you will probably have one or two basketball courts. So that's one of the reasons, I think.
I see. Interesting that you give the historical point of view, but in countries such as the US, interestingly, it is being dominated by the blacks instead of the whites, even though the whites were the one who started, created these sports.
Yeah, because first I think that you have to look at the history context of basketball itself. Canadian actually who created the sports, but then it becomes more popular in the United States.
With the NBA and all that.
Yeah, with the NBA and all. I think because the sports itself evolved. I think at first they thought that basketball is like a very intellectual game instead of like a brute game. At first that they thought that the blacks, they just play with brute force instead of intelligent. But then the game evolved. They started to bring a little bit more of athleticism into the game, and that's how the blacks actually dominates. Not saying that the white not that athletic. If I can give you an example for now, Black Griffin, one of the most like dominant or athletic player, even the slam dunk champion for the NBA. It's kind of a mixed race. It's more like a chocolate kind of race.
What do you mean by mixed race?
I don't know about his parents, but you won't say that he's black. You won't say that he's white either, but
he's biracial.
I think so. So technically, you won't say that certain race has the edge in basketball or in other sports. But yeah, I think.
What about Asians who have made it in NBA? I think so far there's only been a couple, I think.
Yeah, I think the most popular Chinese, the American Chinese, I think, to be technically correct, the American Taiwanese, which is Jeremy Lin. But he's an American, and he has like a typical NBA player build, which is 6 foot something. In terms of, what was the question again?
The Asians who have made it
to the NBA or whichever international tournament.
There would be, of course, the legendary Yao Ming.
Yao Ming is like a very special case. He's like a freak of nature, 7 foot something. Actually, it is interesting to say about Yao Ming because the Chinese actually have this program where for the athletes they actually marry each other. So for Yao Ming, actually is both of his parents are former national players, and even Yao Ming is actually married to a Chinese national player for basketball.
Wow, that's
so they have two tall parents, and then they groom all these players to become a basketball player. Other than that, actually, not much success for the Asia, but there are a few. I think probably because the level of the game and the type of the game is quite different for the NBA. This is quite true for all the other international players. When they come from their country to play NBA, they have to change the game. Even it's actually true for high school or even for college player, because the NBA is actually more physical in nature.
It seems like basketball is truly a sport that ASEAN people enjoy, not just in Southeast Asia but also in East Asia. I remember I read one news where Kim Jong-un, which is the leader of the North Korea, invited one. I'm not sure whether he's an NBA player,
Yeah,
but
I think
he was
you're talking about Ron Artest, which also known as Meta World Peace.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting, to have an American professional basketball player to be invited to North Korea when they don't have good relationship with America.
Yeah, if you ask me, I have no idea actually what that's all about.
I think that would be Dennis Rodman, wouldn't it? And Dennis Rodman has always been something of an anomaly in NBA.
He was Dennis Rodman, was it?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
He's always been a bit of a odd player. I mean, one of the greatest rebounders in basketball history, but he's always been a bit quacky when it comes to personality. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember he came here to play one of the exhibition game here, and he put on makeups. Actually, I thought it was very.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. I think Dennis Rodman is actually traveling the world for just to show. It's not really to play basketball, just like a personality, actually, a celebrity.
All right. So let's bring things back to ASEAN. So, of course, we have recently the ASEAN Basketball League, which has started a few years back, and of course, Malaysia has the Westport Malaysia Dragons representing our country in the league.
Is it different from the SEA Games and other?
It's different from the SEA Games.
Mm-hmm.
It's a yearly league, and we have, I believe, 6 teams playing in the league.
This year we have 16. This is the 5th year for the ASEAN ASEAN Basketball League. It's actually a club base, but represented by. It has some sort of a national pride. Not necessarily that one country only able to send one team. For this year, we have 2 teams actually from Indonesia. We have Indonesia Warriors and we have Laskar Jaya South Sumatra. Actually, if you want to talk about ABL, actually it started off from a football ASEAN League idea, which is, I think they are trying to do a Super League for football, which is probably going to be held next year. In the 5th season, we have West Sports Malaysia Dragons. We also have High Tech Bangkok City from Thailand. We have Saigon Heat from Vietnam. The 2 that I mentioned from
They have very cool
Indonesia.
names.
I think it's all the marketing purpose. And we also have another team from Singapore, which is the Singapore Slingers.
Slingers.
All right. So bringing things back. So ASEAN Basketball League, of course, features both local players and imports. And now the interesting is, a lot of the teams also have players from the Philippines, which of course Philippines are the basketball powerhouse in Southeast Asia. But there's also a lot of local talent, and there's also American imports as well. So now,
American imports for some of the teams.
some of the teams. Yep.
Yeah, they allowed. Excuse me. They allowed actually 2 international imports, and they also allowed. It used to be 3 ASEAN imports. ASEAN imports means that those who has a ASEAN heritage, like for example Jeremy Lin, which won't be able to qualify as an ASEAN import. He will probably be considered as an international import because he's American and Taiwanese descendant. If he's from Indonesia, then he will be able to be considered as ASEAN imports.
All right. And the Westport Malaysia Dragons alone has around 4 imports, I believe.
Yeah, now this year they changed the rule a bit. They allowed 2 international imports, 2 ASEAN imports, and 1 heritage player. Heritage player means that a player who has a heritage from that country that he represents. For example, I think Vietnam has 1 heritage player. I think Donald Arnold. He's American Vietnamese. Interesting though that Vietnam, the Saigon Heat, also has another heritage player, but he is not eligible to suit up for the Saigon Heat for the ABL because they only have 1 quota for the heritage player.
So let's talk. Has the ABL been good for local player development? Let's talk especially in terms of Malaysia and our neighbour Singapore.
Oh, okay. If you compare Malaysia and Singapore, it is interesting because one thing though that if you ask me, definitely I will agree on the basis that ABL is a very good platform for the locals to develop the game. Because personally, I don't think that they has like a lot of competitive tournament being held in Malaysia. I don't think that there's much league. We have the MNBL, the Malaysian National Basketball League, which is only being held for 3 months with 4, 5, or 6 teams competing, which is, if you ask me, it's not enough. ABL actually run for a few months, but then I think around 3, 4 months, depending on the season. But one thing that I sure for know that they play at least 20 games. So in terms of the Malaysia and the Singapore's, the Singapore Slingers teams, their goals actually align with the national team development, because they have the same coach for the national team and also the same coach for the Singapore Slingers. Whereas for the Westport Malaysia Dragons, they are a separate entity from the national team. Even though we have actually a few national players playing for the Westport Malaysia Dragons, but it doesn't necessarily mean that
Do you think it's a negative development for our basketball?
I wouldn't say
arena?
that it's a negative development. I guess that people just have different goals and different views, which is not wrong at all. Because the league, obviously, ABL is not, the goal is not to develop your national team, but it's just to promote, to grow the sports and to popularize the sports in Southeast Asia region. Which, if you ask me, they has been doing a great job actually. I think there's a significant improvement in terms of the popularity of the sports. Some people may argue that it hasn't been doing enough to promote the game whatsoever, but I think as of right now, you can see some of improvement, especially from the Singapore's. Like in the recent SEA game, they actually able to get a 3rd place.
Oh, wow.
We have the same players actually that play for the Singapore Slingers also play for the Singapore national team. And also another example would be from the Vietnam team, the Saigon Heat. They actually finished, I think, last for the last 2 seasons. But the support that they have been receiving is very welcoming. I mean, it's very positive growth, and also I think a lot of support from the locals in Vietnam.
Let's put a focus on the local scene. You said that there's the non-Chinese and the Chinese league. What is that exactly?
It is interesting about the Malaysia basketball that I think we are the only country in the world that have a non-Chinese category. I think I won't say that I agree or disagree with that, but I think it was a necessary step to develop the non-Chinese basketball in
Sounds
Malaysia.
like an affirmative action.
I'm not sure whether it's an affirmative action or not. I mean, it's a measure actually just to popularize the game in the non-Chinese market.
So how does it work for the non-Chinese league?
For the non-Chinese league, we have the national competition. It started as a Sedap Cup, the main sponsor at the time. And then it changed to Petronas Cup, and now it becomes a Maba Cup. There's like the annual national, which is represented by states. We also have all the other non-Chinese league, which is, I think, the most popular currently is the National Community Basketball League, which previously known as the Non-Chinese Basketball League. But that league is actually more catered towards a recreational league. It's more is filled with amateurs players, even though they have a few former national players playing in there.
Just quickly, there's an article on Pemainbolakeranjang.com where you wrote basketball is a Chinese sport, and in quoting the non-Chinese basketball league, you wrote that its original purpose was for the purpose of development, as in to introduce non-Chinese players to the sport and develop their own level. And you said the next step must be taken by the non-Chinese players to mix it up with the Chinese players. I mean, to be the best, you got to play against the best and to beat the best. And the best players in Malaysia are the Chinese, obviously speaking. So you said
I mean, non-Chinese. The word Chinese itself is kind of sensitive, I think, in Malaysian nature. I mean, when you have non-Chinese, if you talk about non-Chinese basketball to those who are not familiar with basketball in Malaysia, they will say the first thing that they come out in their mouth is probably, oh, what the thing is, why there's such a racist thing. And then even the title that basketball is a Chinese sport actually is quite, you can say a little bit of racist. And I think a lot of people do not agree with that. But because of my websites actually cater a lot to the non-Chinese market, and that article actually targeted to the non-Chinese market, it is, I think, because of the we were talking about the non-Chinese basketball. It has been for around 10 years, more so or less. I think they are more comfortable playing in that category alone. So what I'm trying to say is actually you have to go out from your comfort zone, play with all races instead of just certain category. And for now, the best players in the country is actually, most of them, 90% of them are actually the Chinese, because one of the reason is the historical reason, which is they are the one who developed the sports, they are the one who popularized the sports in Malaysia. And now, of course, the sport is actually growing among the other market. But it's not enough, I think, actually, just to play the sport. You have to do more than that, actually, which is, to play in the open tournament.
When you say Chinese league, meaning all are Chinese, or is a mixed group?
It's Chinese or non-Chinese?
You mean the what I mean by the Chinese league, meaning that when you mentioned the Chinese league, does it mean that all of the players are Chinese, or is a mixed group?
There's no such thing as Chinese league,
okay.
But there is a non-Chinese league.
Okay.
When I said, in general, when I use the term Chinese, which is basically an open tournament, which is open to all, as long as you are Malaysian. The reason I think why they developed or they created the non-Chinese category, because if you play basketball, you probably know this, that if you can tell that the difference actually quite large between those who play basketball regularly and those who don't. So most people who started to play basketball after they finished the high school, which can be said among the non-Chinese market, most of them started to play basketball after they finish their high school. They get interest in basketball after they finish their high school, compared to those who the Chinese market, which is they started earlier in the primary school. So the level, the numbers of experience is too large, and then I think kind of like if you don't create the non-Chinese category, it kind of like disinterests them to play competitive basketball anymore.
Actually, this is true, because I played with my high school team back when I was 15 onwards, and I was one of two Malay players on the school team, and it was a bit hard for me to get into it at first, because I started the sport relatively late, while most of my teammates have been playing since like primary school, and it was just that I was lucky in that I had a relatively big body that allowed me to adapt my game pretty quickly.
You have the Yao Ming body.
Not really, but yeah, it's like Mislan says, you have to go. It's not enough to stay in your comfort zone. You have to go out and play with other players. I've played with Chinese, Africans, Australians, and trust me, those guys have really big bodies. And yeah, it helped me. It helped develop my own. Well, I guess not just my abilities as a player, but also my social skills as well. So I can easily get along with Chinese players, non-Chinese players, and it's important that we get out of that comfort zone. I mean, make it a truly basketball is an international sport.
But if you want to sort of integrate the non-Chinese into, the Malaysian league, regardless whether it's international or regional, what is the step forward, the way forward for it, like besides creating a non-Chinese league?
Yeah, personally, I think it has to be in the grassroots level. Currently, that we don't have enough resources, like not in terms of facilities, but we also don't have enough
coaches.
Yeah, correct. Also, we don't have enough support from the local community in terms of for the grassroots level. Actually, I do think that for now they have a very good support in the Chinese community, in the local Chinese community in terms of basketball support. But I think because of naturally a lot of the community the Malay community, they focus more on the football development for the grassroots. So, yeah, I think the way to move forward is actually to focus more on the grassroots, because I do believe sports, not only in basketballs, but sports in general, is a very good way to do racial unity, because especially during the young age, where you nurture them early to interact with each other instead of certain race and whatnot.
So thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your view, and I would agree with you. I think the larger goal is national unity, and as well as to make basketball as probably one of the first choice for Malaysians.
That would be nice. Yeah, hopefully in the near future.
Thank you.
Okay.